Well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Again, my name is John LaLoggia. Welcome to the New Kids on the Block, How to Land Your First Job or Internship. We're so glad that you're joining us today. Again, John LaLoggia. I'm a social media manager here at Advanced Group and really excited to introduce the topic and today's speaker. We have a great presentation for you, so let's go ahead and get started. So just a few housekeeping items today. Please chat with us live on Twitter and follow along with the hashtag JobSeeker2018. Please submit questions to us during the webinar as they come up, and we'll have a great Q&A session at the end with Nate. The way you submit questions is by clicking the control panel of the GoToWebinar and typing your questions in the question chat box. You're all on listen only. To prevent noise interference, but we definitely want to be interactive. So the more Twitter chatter we have, the more questions that you all submit, the better. Lastly, we're recording today's session and we'll send it out to everyone with the slides on Friday or Monday. So please keep an eye out for that. Just a little bit about Advanced Resources. We're part of Advanced Group, which is a global recruiting and consulting firm with 4 distinct companies. You should definitely check it out. We place talent all over the country and are expanding our reach every day. We've helped the industry evolve in our 30 years of business and are nationally recognized as leaders of staffing and recruiting. All right, so enough of the housekeeping. Let's meet your speaker. Nate Wegner is a Workforce Solutions Program Manager at Advanced Resources. He works with our biggest clients, helping them identify and hire top talent for their organizations. In his tenure at AR, he's been promoted twice, reached President's Club twice, and continues to connect great people with great opportunities every day. He's super knowledgeable. He's a great recruiting and career expert and has a ton of knowledge to share with you all today about how to get noticed by employers and how to land a job early in your career. Nate has invited everyone to connect with him on LinkedIn, so definitely recommend you taking him up on that. Without further ado, here's Nate Wegner.
All right, thank you, John, and thanks everybody for joining. So, basically for me, I mean, this particular topic stood out to me for a couple of different reasons. I mean, in my role here at Advanced Resources, I interact with a lot of clients of ours that are hiring people that are, coming out of school fairly recently. On the flip side of that, I work with a lot of job seekers and candidates who are, coming out of school looking for that first opportunity. So, I see a lot of, I see the impact that can have on somebody's career, right? Getting off to a strong start, getting in the right environment, finding a mentor and a great manager, things like that. So really for me, I also know that, some of you may be sitting in a seat right now where there's a lot of information and you may, kind of be overwhelmed with some of it. So really, I want to answer any questions that you may have. So definitely submit those, as John mentioned. And I really just want to give you as much of a roadmap and as many tools as I can to help you feel more planned and hopefully feel like you have some action items, coming out of this. So here's just, kind of a agenda for today. So a lot of, myths or common misconceptions and things that I am asked about on a daily basis. I can touch on some of those. And again, just really help you plan and make sure that you have the right mindset going into your search. I'm happy to tell you a little bit more about, from an employer and from a hiring manager's perspective, what they're looking for, sometimes more importantly, what they're not looking for, and just strategies for you to stand out in the right way. There's a lot of interactions that you will have with people that are potential, hiring managers. So always, kind of going into those with the right strategies that I think is important. So I'll give you a little insight on those. And then, as I mentioned, just creating a plan and a roadmap to land that first job and, make sure you're on the right path. So, and with that, so we'll talk just kind of about the right approach to the job market. You would be surprised how many people I interact with that a simple tweak to their approach to their search or the applications they're sending out and things like that would do wonders for them. So to me, the approach, whether it's your job search or in a lot of other areas of life, is very, very important. So we'll talk a little bit about that and, and see how we can help you all be successful. So one question I get a lot from people, and this changes as your career progresses, but specifically from people earlier in their career, should I be very, very targeted in my search, or should I consider a lot of different types of opportunities, right? So I always tell people, and you have the little graphic here, cast a wide net. And I think that's very, very important. As I talk about some of these things, again, I'm speaking from the experience of, having seen people either really help themselves or in some cases limit themselves based on their approach, right? So that cast a wide net approach, we'll go into a little bit more detail on that. But really what I'm getting at there is, being open to different types of opportunities, different sizes of companies, different types of management styles, even things in terms of commute. I think I myself have had experiences where early in my career I was, willing to maybe make some sacrifices in terms of a long drive to and from work and things like that. So I think that's very valuable. And I can give a lot of examples about different hiring managers I work with. A couple that come to mind. I mean, there's a finance director at a Fortune 100 company that we work with fairly frequently. He started with that organization coming out of school doing data entry, you know what I mean? So he saw the value in getting his foot in the door with that organization, building those relationships, and he knew that, that job he was doing on day one was not his dream job because he was, coming out of school. But he knew that it would ultimately put him on the path to where he wanted to be. A lot of other managers, I know an HR director who started in more of a customer service role for the HR team, right? So again, both of those examples, there's an element of that long-term goal of where they wanted to be. They were in the right department. They were with a company that would support that personal growth. But just keep that in mind. Yeah, I see that, forgotten oftentimes in searches. And I think it's important to always remember that, that's kind of the approach that I think is successful to take. Secondly, we hear the word numbers game. A couple of days ago, I had somebody actually verbatim ask me, or tell me the numbers game was getting frustrating. And a lot of, I'm sure some of you are feeling that, and there's a lot of information out there, and sometimes it can feel like you're becoming just a number amongst a group of graduates. But again, there are a lot of good ways to make that not the case and differentiate yourself from some of your peers and really stand out to these hiring managers. And a lot of times when you get into the flow of playing that quote unquote numbers game, it can lead to a lot of inefficient use of your time, right? And some of you may experience, sending out a bunch of applications and getting responses from, not as desirable jobs, right? So while you want to be, cast that wide net as we talked about, know that there are a lot of strategies for you to rise above that, again, numbers game and really differentiate yourself from your competition and your peers. Here are some numbers that I thought kind of, piggyback on that and show some of what you are talking about there, what we're talking about. And these numbers are rising every year. We're seeing it, right? So really the main point here is just the simple fact that, you put in a lot of hard work, and a lot of probably late nights and you're, and getting your degree. That's extremely valuable, and that's a huge building block to where you want to be. But just kind of keep these things in mind. And one, beyond just the simple number of, there are this many graduates each year, the applicants per job stands out to me. Just from the simple fact of, from your perspective, think about that, right? As you're tailoring your resume, as you're tailoring your message to, companies and managers that you'd like to work for, let's say there are 250 exactly applicants for that job, right? So that's you and 249 other resumes. What are you doing to get yourself in front of that hiring manager to allow then yourself to have a chance to sell, you know what I mean? And tell them why you are the right choice for their role. So this slide here, so I'm a very big believer in it's about where you finish in your career and not where you start, right? I gave a couple examples of that earlier, but I literally have this conversation every single day because, in everybody's career, you're going to go through ups and downs, right? You're going to have days and weeks and years where everything is going great and that's just the way it goes. There will be peaks and valleys, you know what I mean? So just always remember, if you are on that path where you want to ultimately be, that is what's most important. A couple of other examples that I like to allude to internally here at Advanced Resources. So we have a CFO. He started at Advanced Resources as a contractor many years ago. He had a family connection to our company, and he was here prior to me getting here, but he started here on a contract basis in a, as an accountant. You know what I mean? He came in here feeling that this may be some, just a kind of a stopping point for him along the course of his career. And now, look where he is, right? So he's continued to grow and grow. The director of my group, which is called Workforce Solutions, she's been with our company about 11 years, and she started with Advanced Resources when we were a bit smaller 11 years ago, at working the front desk as a receptionist, and now she's the director with, I want to say, 10 or 11 direct reports and managing a team, one of our largest teams here at Advanced Resources. So again, just keep those types of examples in mind, and you may know people yourselves who have had similar stories. But I always, I just always like to keep that in mind, right? It is about where you finish, not where you start. Just make sure you're gaining value along the way. So we'll talk a little bit about building a target list. And some of you may have already done that, but you can put together a target list of companies, specific contacts of those companies, industries, things like that. This deck will be sent out to you. But here are 5. I recommend taking a look at these 5 points here and just prioritizing what's most important to you, right? Some people come into their search and they are very, very focused on the company or the company size or the industry they're working in. Others really are more focused on company culture, things of that nature. So prioritize these, and really, I always recommend writing them down on paper. But even if you don't, just know what's most important to you, either now and in the future, right? And really what you're building towards, and always keep that in mind. So, just to summarize here, we talked about approach, right? So again, I mean, these are just things that I always tell people to keep in mind, and I've seen it time and time again benefit people as they go through their careers. Just maintaining that right approach. And I know it's not listed on the slide here, but you'll hear me say it a lot, the word differentiation. That's what I'm talking about. Just know that if you are one of the probably small percentage that uses all of these valuable tools and really has the right approach every day in every interaction you have with potential hiring managers, that's going to go a very long way. So as we talk about differentiation, we'll talk a little bit more about that. One of the key terms here that I like to talk about is soft skills. You probably hear that a lot, and kind of going back to what we talked about before, the resume that's more of the hard skills. What you want to convey to other professionals and hiring managers are the soft skills that you bring to the table, right? Again, that puts you above other individuals interviewing for those same roles. So this, just to piggyback on that, I mean, it may sound cliche, but I truly, truly believe it. Whether it's myself, clients that I'm working with, I can send somebody a resume, and the first question I always get is, tell me about this person. Tell me who this person is, right? So just know that that's what people are looking for. That's what people are asking about when they're talking to your references, right, that you provide in a job search. That's what they're asking about. Who is this person? What are their morals? What are their values? What is their work ethic? And so this slide shows some of that. But it truly is very, very important. And I think it's a point where a lot of people sometimes do fall short in their search is, they go into, an interview or an application or what have you, very, very focused on what's on paper. And I always tell people some of this stuff sounds simple, but it really is a matter of, I'll tell people going into interviews, they have your resume. They know what's there. They know where you went to school. So based on that, these people are interested in you, right? So as you get further and further through your search, these are really the skills that are going to, get you from an interview to an offer, and then even beyond that to, potential promotions and things like that. I mean, I can't overstate the importance of some of these soft skills essentially that you can kind of convey to people. So job search strategies. We touched on this a little bit earlier. Just making sure that you're doing more than simply submitting applications, right? So a lot of people will ask me, what are some of the things that I can do to make sure that that I'm on the right track? So job applications, right? I'm sure a lot of you have submitted many of them. There are, the job boards, Career Builder, things like that. There's a lot out there. And there is some value and obvious value to getting those applications out, right? That is definitely part of your search. But it's the people that, have additional strategies and have an additional plan that really differentiate themselves, not only to me, but to all of my clients and different hiring managers that I work with on a daily basis. So, the answer to this myth or misconception, I would say, is probably no. The best way is not applying through online applications. Again, I don't want to downplay it, but here are some other strategies that I recommend utilizing that people find a lot of value in. So networking, that's a word that's thrown around a lot, and it's very important. Some numbers that I can talk about, referrals, right? So referrals through networking. In the business that I'm in of hiring, I encounter this all day, every single day, right? And so whether it's a number that I can provide you, a referral is, by the numbers, 5 times more likely to be hired than somebody that simply came through an application. So sometimes those are personal referrals, but other times those are referrals simply through other people that you've interacted with in school or had interviewed with previously that you made a strong impression on that simply you weren't hired by that person. I myself, I know I was a referral when I came to Advanced Resources, right? It took, somebody who I had worked with previously that worked at Advanced Resources mentioned my name, and that got the conversation started. So leveraging LinkedIn is extremely important, and I think underutilized quite a bit by a lot of people. Even people that are further into their careers, I see a lot of errors or just simply lack of information on LinkedIn that I think is very, it can be detrimental to a search. So really, we'll talk a little bit more specifically about LinkedIn here in a bit, but know the power of that, and this is a free tool that is out there that, there's endless amounts of information on hiring managers and job postings and things like that really I highly recommend you make sure you're leveraging in a positive way. And lastly, working with recruiters. I think that, I'm speaking as a recruiter, and so I'm probably a bit biased here, but I can tell you from experience that connecting with a couple very, very strong recruiters is going to go a long way. I keep talking about, my clients, these people that I work with, these are people that, somebody who I connect with that makes a strong impression instantly has access to, you know what I mean? And so I work with a lot of very large organizations that I'm very, part of the reason I love doing what I do is because I'm able to connect people directly with these different hiring managers with these companies that without utilizing our network, that job seeker likely would not have been able to get that connection, right? So we'll talk about some of the other benefits of that, but that's, again, 3 strategies I recommend keeping in mind and really just making sure that, you're using to the best of your ability. So networking here. So I talked briefly about a target list. I think that's very, very important. Now, when I talk about a target list, I don't mean that in that you are necessarily ruling out other opportunities, right? We talked about casting a wide net, but I do think with anything, and especially something that can be as daunting as a job search, creating a target list is very, very important. So I always recommend 10 companies. You can write more, but 10 companies that you would really like to work for. There are thousands here in the Chicagoland area. So there was a previous slide that listed some of the different points you can focus on, but think about industry, think about company size, think about people read reviews online. There's all kinds of information out there, but just simply the fact of having a starting point with, okay, here are 10 companies I would love to work for. Does that necessarily mean I will work for one of them in my first role? No, but you could, and it will really give you some direction in your search that I think is usually going to be beneficial. Same goes for positions, right? Job titles, things like that, things that you've, I'm sure, seen and been thinking about since you began a specific degree path. And then through that too, those 10 target companies, always a good idea to go online, go on LinkedIn, go on the company website, but really look up specific contacts, who are managing teams at those companies that you would like to connect with. It's never a bad idea to even attempt to connect with them on LinkedIn, right? You'd be surprised how many people don't take that extra step, right? So don't feel like you're one of hundreds or one of thousands that may be reaching out to a particular contact on LinkedIn. A small percentage of people actually will take that step, right? So have that list and utilize it. And again, a lot of that is about just having direction in your search. Compiling your contacts. So this, we just sort of touched on that, but really take some time and think about it, whether that's something as simple as pulling up your LinkedIn contacts or pulling up your Facebook contacts. Could be something as simple as that, and just really looking at where you may have connections, where in places that you would like to work. You'd be surprised, the 7 degrees of separation, or what they say, you'd be surprised how many connections you have that probably could be very valuable to you and would be more than willing to help you if you simply, recognize that you have that connection and utilize it. Asking for what you want. So this has to do with kind of the approach and the message that you're conveying to people and these contacts that you may be reaching out to. I always recommend just make sure when you are connecting with people that you see as valuable to you in your career, make sure that you are conveying the message to them that you are not asking simply for a favor, right? So, seek out people that you would love to, pick their brain, get information from, and reach out to them with that attitude and that mentality of, can we schedule some time? Do you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes would be great, but do you have some time where we can connect and I can ask you questions, right? And so you're gaining valuable information from those interactions, but you're also making a connection with that person in a way where they will remember you as somebody that this person has a good head on their shoulders, you know what I mean? And they have the right approach and they're willing to learn. Going back to some of those soft skills, they're willing to learn. They want to know what somebody who has been there recommends that I do. And preparation, of course, that's important in any aspect. We talked a lot about that already. So, planning and knowing, okay, here are my action steps. I want to, send out X number of LinkedIn invites in a day, right? Or something as simple as that, but really just having a plan. So, you'll have something at the end of your day of job searching, which can be, which can be rough at times. I know from experience that, that you've accomplished a goal throughout the course of the day and you've moved closer to that end goal of, that next great opportunity. LinkedIn, we talked about. So there's a lot there, obviously. A couple of highlights here that I sometimes find people are not aware of. If you look at the bottom left here, there are a lot of opportunities on LinkedIn, open jobs that you will not find on Career Builder and other job sites and things of that nature, right? So it's always good, have some alerts and some searches set up there because you'll find a lot, and I think a lot of the reason behind that is these hiring managers, they post a job on Career Builder or another job board and they get the exactly what we talked about earlier, the 250 applicants. And that's a lot of resumes and things to sift through, whereas they post on other through other avenues. LinkedIn is one of those, and there's far fewer people applying, and it gives you a leg up, you know what I mean? So keep that in mind. The profile game changers in the top right there, that's very important. And again, I think we'll go into slightly more detail on that in a bit. But having a strong profile is very, very important. Even something as simple as, not having a profile picture or not having a headline describing yourself, not having your resume simply downloadable from LinkedIn. You can upload that to your profile. I strongly recommend doing that because not only are hiring managers going to see that, but they're running searches themselves, right? They're attempting to recruit simply via LinkedIn, and their recruiters and people like me are doing the same. So having that strong presence on LinkedIn is going to go a very, very long way, and I've seen it in practice. As a recruiter, I'm also I have some definite thoughts on this. So I have people ask, I have people ask me this, and I see examples of people who, they're open to having conversations when they're actively looking for a job, and they kind of close those conversations out when they're not, right? I can tell you myself personally, I've been with Advanced Resources coming up in 4 years this May, and it's the best career decision I've ever made. I was in touch with the recruiter from Advanced Resources probably about a year and a half before I came to Advanced Resources. So, at the time I was not looking for a job, but I made a connection with this particular recruiter, stayed in touch with her, and eventually the timing was right. And, I ended up in a company that I love working for, and I've had a lot of great opportunities with. So something to keep in mind, right? Always keep those conversations open. And when we, keep using the word networking, continue to build your network. Always do that. Talking about recruiters, again, I always preface this when I talk to people as I'm biased. I mentioned leveraging these recruiters. I mean, these are networks that you are instantly tapped into the second that you talk to or meet with a recruiter and make a strong impression on them. A couple of things that, we talk about the piece of paper, the resume, getting you in front of an opportunity. That's great. But as a recruiter, one of my favorite things to do is, I'm a big believer in the resume. The piece of paper is not a summary of who you are, and there's a lot more to that story. And there's a lot of reasons why a specific candidate may be the right fit for a company, right? The culture fit, the soft skills, the great attitude, willingness to learn, et cetera. Well, those are things that a recruiter can convey for you directly. I don't go to a client with simply a resume and ask them what they think. I go to them, and knowing their background, knowing this client's background, I have those conversations and can really be an advocate for candidates that I'm looking to place, and give that backstory, you know what I mean? And give that story that you as a job seeker sometimes are unable to give because you simply have, the avenue of submitting that resume. So just know that's what good recruiters are doing for you behind the scenes and are really able to do for you. And there's a lot of other points here, and you can look at these with, recruiters can help negotiate pay. I've definitely been involved in that many times. But preparation for interviews is something we'll talk about here in a minute. But as a recruiter, that is a huge benefit to people that we are working with because we have the backstory on our clients, what they look for when they hire people, what type of people have done well and been promoted and had success in these specific roles. So as a recruiter who has that backstory, they can give you a lot of information that will help you prepare and succeed in an interview, and go in with a leg up to all of those other interviews, knowing almost exactly, and sometimes in some of my clients I know well enough, it is exact. I can tell them exactly what questions they will ask and what they need to be prepared for. So, again, I strongly recommend making a connection with at least one or two or three different recruiters who you feel, understand your interests and really can help further your career where you want to be. Tailoring your job search assets. So we'll talk about what these are. I mean, there's three primary assets that we, can touch on here. And those are, so we'll get into that. But really, the first one is the resume, right? So that's what we keep talking about, and people are constantly changing their resumes, asking what the best way to write a resume is. And I say a lot, you can ask 5 different people how they recommend you write your resume. You're going to get 5 different answers, or at least 4, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of different schools of thought on resumes. And what I tell people, and what I feel a lot of people don't do, is, really tailoring your resume, even minor tweaks to specific jobs that you're looking for. So, the myth or misconception here is that you just need one really good resume to apply for all jobs. Not necessarily the best strategy, especially if you are casting that wide net. You know what I mean? You always want to make sure that you are putting the most relevant information to the job that you're applying for, at the forefront of your resume to get you noticed amongst that pile of resumes that a manager may be looking at. Here are those three assets we talked about, right? So the resume. One other point I would make, and this changes the more experience you gain, the more you work. But I do feel that keeping a resume on one page is important for people who are recent graduates coming out of school. Really condense that and make sure that every bullet point, every piece of information on there is valuable and is relevant to what you're looking for. Another little note, so you'll have, many of you I'm sure have had part-time roles, jobs in the summer, etc. Don't overstate those. I can tell you just from my perspective, seeing a lot of resumes and different hiring managers, that it's really what you're trying to convey there is the work ethic, you know what I mean? And the fact that you did work through school and work in the summer and things. So that's what you're showing. So just control that message a bit. I see that mistake made sometimes. LinkedIn profile we've talked about, very, very, very important. Just make sure that today go and it may take a couple of days, right, to get a professional headshot, and it doesn't need to be taken by a professional, but get a good photo there. Think about a descriptive headline, get your resume completed if it's not already completed, and uploaded to your LinkedIn profile so a recruiter can simply find you on LinkedIn and pull down your resume without you ever having to do anything. And then social media presence is very important as well. I think we've got some stats on this, but I've seen a number of people either not interviewed or not hired, and even a few examples of people that were not hired after already receiving an offer because of what they had on social media, right? So just be cognizant of that. Look at your Facebook profile, Instagram, all of these things. And I doubt that this is the first time that you've heard it, but I just wanted to reiterate it because, I see it all the time. I search people, just a quick Google search, right, which pulls up those social media platforms. I do that all the time. I know a lot of hiring managers that I work with do it before even, if they see a resume they like, the first step is to go to Google and search that social media presence. So just know that is viewed very, very frequently. Have those privacy settings on. And just, don't put anything out or delete anything that is out there that you would not want a future boss or future manager of yours to be able to view. Here are those numbers I mentioned. So, they're right there. You all can read them, but, it's a kind of a staggering number, right? So again, just kind of eye-opening to some people. It may be something that people don't think about at times, but, that information that's online, on social media, et cetera, it really, really can impact hiring decisions, impact your career in a negative way, right? So as we're talking about all of these positive strategies and things that you should be doing going in, this is a very important piece, that all of that can be done properly, and a hiring manager can have a great interview with you. Everything has gone great to that point. They're about to send out an offer, and one small piece of information really can impact that. All right, so we're at the interview. So, a lot of information regarding interview prep, tips, things of that nature are out there. So I won't go too much into detail on some of these things. But here's sort of a top 10, right? So as I mentioned before, this deck will go out. Really do think about these things though. And as I mentioned too, while you can get a lot of good interview prep tips from your recruiter, if a recruiter is the person that's setting you up for an interview, you can do that with an HR team. So one thing that I would strongly recommend is, let's say you apply for a job and you have an interview with your hiring manager next week. Go on LinkedIn, go on the website, and try to find either somebody on that team, like a future peer of yours, an HR contact. Oftentimes those individuals are able to help, but really seek those people out and reach out to them for interview tips. All of these things listed here are going to be very helpful, and I can say it and can't overstate the importance of interview preparation. But really trying to get some of that inside track and inside information prior to the interview is also valuable. Two little points I would bring up here. I guess number 10, even though this is at the end, but sending a thank you note, very important. Always remember to do that. I can't tell you how many times I've seen individuals have a great interview and simply not show that follow-up or show that interest of that manager receiving a thank you note. And, it took them out of contention for that job. So I guess secondly, we'll go up to number 2 here. The interest and enthusiasm, that is it kind of seems as though it's self-explanatory, but ultimately, we talked about earlier, right? I went over for a couple of minutes who you are, now what you are. A lot of times, people are nervous. You go into interviews, that's expected. But really, don't be afraid to be bold, and go in and tell somebody, this is why I'm interested in your company. I know that you are a great company, and I am very, very interested for these 2 or 3 reasons, right? So, not being timid and being bold really not only makes you memorable, but it shows a lot of good things, right? So again, there's a lot of these tips. You'll find plenty of it out there. And I think we have another document that we'll try to also send out with some really good example questions and, ways to prepare for different types of interviews, but something I strongly recommend. Last thing for you guys, this is a long quote from me that was something that, I was really just kind of thinking about why do I do what I do, and what is the one piece of advice I give to job seekers, right? And so, you can read this. We have the bolded part at the bottom here, but I truly am a believer in, if you're willing to put in the time and the work, success will follow, right? So I'm hoping that this kind of makes some sense and registers that really what I try to get across to people, because I've seen it so many times, is the simple approach of, kind of at the top of this quote here, leaving immediate gratification out of these different choices, right? As long as you are building towards where you want to be, as long as you are finding connections that, you are going to be able to learn from and that will be valuable, then you're doing the right thing, right? And, something I didn't really touch on as much in the presentation here, but if you don't already have one, find a mentor. Find a mentor that is a successful person in your desired career field. And, that will help with your connections and things like that, as we talked about, but really just, learn the path, you know what I mean? Learn how other people that are where you would like to be, learn how they've got there. As I mentioned before, there's probably a lot of different strategies, a lot of different paths that people have followed. But if there's one, piece of hopefully wisdom or just personal experience that I can pass along, it would be, work hard, make the right, impressions on people, and be willing to sacrifice a little bit to get to where you want to go, right? And I promise you, I've seen it time and time and time again that, it will pay off. And obviously, I've that is why I love doing what I do and kind of, spend so much time in this field of hiring. So again, hopefully that has some value for all of you.
Thanks a lot, Nate. That was great. So yeah, I definitely think, to touch on what you said, it's not, it definitely takes some discipline, but if you stick to the plan and you're organized and you're, thoughtful, I think all that stuff, plays out in your favor when you're applying for, your first job. So I think that was awesome. Now we have about 20 minutes for a Q&A session. So I know a few questions came in during the webinar, so we'll get to those. And we definitely encourage you all to keep submitting questions now. This is super valuable time that we definitely want to take advantage of. So we'll kind of get right to it. Nate, first question, should you apply to the same job twice if you don't hear back? Yes or no?
So that's a good question. I would say general rule, probably no, with the caveat that, over a specific time frame, I wouldn't rule it out, right? So, you don't want to be submitting an application to the same job twice in a week or probably even twice in a month. But use your judgment, right? And a lot of this kind of depends on some other factors such as company size and things of that nature, right? Because if you think about some of these larger companies, think about the huge volume of applicants they have for a lot of these jobs. In those instances, it may not be a bad idea to, a month later, if that job is still open, maybe, click submit and get in there again, see if, you catch their attention that time. I would say maybe tailor your resume a different way or add something to your resume or, sort of set that application up potentially to be more successful the second time around. But that's a very good question. As long as you are not doing that, every week or every couple of days or, in a very short time frame, I wouldn't totally rule that out. The only other caveat I would add there is if you are, you've applied to a job that, clearly you're thinking about, applying a second time that you're very, very interested in, try and use some of those LinkedIn avenues or other networking avenues that we talked about if you haven't already. So see if you can find that hiring contact, that recruiter, that HR contact, the direct hiring manager, whoever you can, and see if you can find them on LinkedIn, and connect with them there. And if they are willing to connect, then you can maybe send them a message, right? But the first step is finding that information and really taking that approach of, okay, I submitted my application amongst many other applications and it didn't yield the result I wanted. I didn't get the interview, but I still really want that job. What do I do? What is another course I can take to, to potentially make it work the second time around?
Yeah, for sure. And that's interesting that you say that too, because, from your presentation, there are a variety of ways to apply for the same job, whether it's through the website or contacting your hiring manager or through LinkedIn. So, so definitely being creative in your search, especially if it's for a job you want, or you feel like there's a lot of applications, this type of avenue, maybe going to one of those other ones. I think that's great. Question 2. So we heard a lot about soft skills and, being on social media. For me, I hear it all the time, and it really is a big thing for employers at this point. So why are soft skills so much more desired by employers in today's workforce as opposed to maybe, 10 years ago?
Yeah. That's another good question. And I would say this is something that does change as your career progresses. Those soft skills are always important. They never lose their importance. But the more very specific technical experience or expertise that you gain, that obviously starts to gain more value. I would say in this particular instance, right, since we're talking about graduating and looking for that first role, at the end of the day, hiring managers, they're hiring somebody who has graduated fairly recently with the expectation that they're training, so they're not expecting that person will come in with a wide variety of immediately transferable skills that are going to add a ton of value. So just hopefully that gives a little bit of insight into where they're coming from. So when we talk about the soft skills, those are the things that more experienced people, and more experienced professionals, hiring managers are going to be drawn to, because that is going to make that training process easier and more enjoyable for them. I hope that kind of makes sense, but I would say that's probably the biggest reason where earlier in your career, those soft skills have so much value and maybe have more value than they might as your career progresses, is for the simple fact that there's going to be a lot of new information you're going to learn, and someone has to teach it to you. Somebody wants to teach it to you, and that's their job, So that's why such a highlight on those soft skills is because, as someone myself who's been involved in a lot of training, right? I think I made mention of it earlier, but, those people that I want to hire and I want to train and really want to spend even extra time with, right? Beyond the simple training time that I have dedicated on my calendar, are those soft skills and that desire to learn, that ambition, that work ethic, all of those things that, I think a lot of people have and maybe don't convey as well as they can. But that's it. I think that's it. I think that it has a lot to do with that training that will be provided in that first position, and how much somebody is wanting to train based on their personality and some of those soft skills that we talked about.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Question 3, do you see value in an internship if you are already graduated and have been looking for a full-time job? And does it really come down to which particular field you're looking in?
I definitely do. I definitely think, especially, earlier, coming out of school, right? Any and all experience that you can gain is valuable. We talk about casting that wide net. And I think whether a job is an internship or a full-time job or a contract job, or, there are a lot of different options. At the end of the day, you're gaining the experience. You know what I mean? And that's really what matters. And I also think that, say it is an internship, right? And say maybe you have an opportunity to take on an internship after you've graduated. If it were me looking at that resume and I saw on the resume that this individual graduated and then was still willing to take another internship to gain experience in their desired field. To me, that shows a lot of those soft skills that we keep kind of talking about, and the willingness to make some sacrifices potentially, right? Whether that's money, whether maybe it's an unpaid internship. There's a lot of ways this can go, but I see a ton of value in that, and I wouldn't see that as much different at all from a full-time job. You know what I mean? If it is an internship, as I mentioned, at the end of the day, you're gaining those skills, gaining that experience, and applying that knowledge that you gain through your schooling, which in any environment, wherever you have the opportunity to do it, and wherever you have the opportunity then while doing that to be exposed to other managers or senior staff members that you are sitting with every day and learning from every day, ultimately that's what you're looking for. You know what I mean? You are at a point where you're just looking to gain those skills internally, but to a certain point on paper as well, right? So long answer, but hopefully I would never discourage somebody from accepting an internship simply because they've already graduated. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just the more experience that you have and learning from a variety of different people, I think it's only going to help too. And it also, of course, definitely looks good on paper that you're still willing to work and you're hungry. So I think that's great. Next question, what's your advice for international students for their job search in the U.S. and specifically for the students that have working experience in their home country and now looking for a full-time job in the U.S.?
Yeah, that's something that I do deal with. I would say it depending on the level, or the amount of experience you do have in your home. The value in recruiters. I think there are a lot of recruiters out there that are able to that to be spoken to from that resume, where having an advocate, whether that's a recruiter, a referral, a personal connection that can help you get your foot in the door. I mean, I think that's very valuable because I'm sure that you would probably agree, given the opportunity to explain this to somebody and have a conversation, there's a lot of experience that you have, a lot that you can, and areas of expertise and knowledge you've gained, et cetera, that may be overlooked on that resume simply because it is international.
Definitely. Next question, when employers ask you for references to call, what do they exactly ask you about?
It can vary, obviously, but they're asking about work performance, primarily when it relates to the work performance, the performance itself, right? Was this person good at their job? Were they willing to learn, and were they reliable, right? So they're trying to make sure that, maybe this person impressed me in an interview, but is there anything that I don't know about where maybe this person misses a lot of work or things of that nature, right? So those things will be asked about. And beyond that, it depends on your level of experience. For somebody that may be calling maybe a teacher for a reference from school or somebody from your internship, we're talking about it a lot, but they're asking about who you are, right? They don't know who you are necessarily based on your resume. So when they get a chance to talk to a reference, they're getting a secondhand or a firsthand account of your work ethic, your willingness to learn, your ability to work well with other coworkers, how you interact with others on a project, things like that. So a lot of it's that, you know what I mean? There may be certain references, certain people out there that when they speak to a reference, they're getting very specific as it relates to like the technical aspect of your job. And that may happen, but I think a lot more of it is to really just, a lot of times these are done after interviews, right? So ideally for them to reaffirm the strong impression that they have after meeting you personally. Nothing can give a clearer story of an individual than speaking directly to somebody who knows them well, who has managed them, who has had one-on-one meetings with them, whatever it is, but worked with them directly, trained them, and that's really what oftentimes in reference calls they're trying to gauge.
Of course. And we had a bit of technical difficulty during the question, what's your advice for international students and their job search in the U.S.? Could you just kind of touch on that just very briefly again, since we had a little bit of technical difficulty when you were responding?
Yeah, sure. Kind of the summary there was just simply that, I know where people who are in that boat are coming from, for sure. I see that a lot. And I get that question a lot in my daily job, just speaking with applicants and people that are coming from, an international job or program. And I think the basic thought there was, if you can find an advocate to help you speak to that expertise that you've gained and the knowledge that you've gained, the skills that you've gained, et cetera, from that experience, while there may be different policies, procedures, processes here in the U.S., right? An example I can think of is the accounting and finance, right? So there are some very distinct differences in having been an accountant abroad and now being one here in the United States, and there's variations for other fields as well. But, having an advocate, so having a referral, and I think in those instances, obviously, honestly, it's probably even of heightened importance to pursue those other avenues that we talked about, those other strategies of making connections, using your referral network, and really, again, having advocates speak for you and people that can speak to that experience directly, right? And people that have had that experience, that have, progressed in the career path that you're seeking. So hopefully that makes sense. I guess the bottom line there is just, I think that's just another, potential hurdle where, your creativity, your resourcefulness and things like that in your search with making other connections will definitely be a benefit to you. And I mentioned it before, but as I talk about these other references and advocates, recruiters are going to be very helpful in that particular instance as well.
Definitely. Last question we have for you, and we're trying to wrap up in the next couple minutes because we want to get everyone out here on time. We know if people have things to do. So what type of information should someone include in a private LinkedIn message to not only get a hiring manager to accept their invitation, but to respond back?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And if there was an exact science to it, life would be a lot easier for a lot of people. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really, really good question. I mean, I would say keeping it concise is probably, I would say, a rule of thumb to always follow. I know just from my personal experience, and I'm a big LinkedIn, I'm a big believer in LinkedIn, but if I see a very, very long message, several paragraphs, come through LinkedIn from somebody that I don't personally know, it may not be at the forefront of what I'm looking at, right? So keep it concise and really just, again, take that approach of you're not asking for a favor. You're not asking necessarily for a tangible favor. Can you interview me? Can you connect me with this person? I would always, approach those messages and approach those conversations of, hey, I really appreciate your time, really appreciate you connecting. I am at a point right now where I am seeking a position in this industry or with this title, and I see that you've done this and this. I would love to get some insight from you or any advice that you might be able to offer in terms of effective job search strategies and what would be what the right steps are for me to take. You know what I mean? So that's the biggest thing, at least for me personally. I notice those types of messages, and I'm much more likely to respond to those types of messages when somebody's asking me, what, how, why type questions versus can you do this for me? You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that gives a little bit of a roadmap, but again, just keep that that approach in mind, that you're asking for advice, you're asking for a step in the right direction, and not necessarily asking for that end result right off the bat.
That's a great point, and definitely asking for advice and wanting, seeking the advice and trying to be educational, but also doing your due diligence and learning a little bit about their company and their background, not just sort of a cold call message, that you had some thought and did some research and knew that they were working on this project, maybe kind of doing a little bit of a veiled reference in your message. So they can be like, oh, wow, this person read up on the company, knows who I am, knows what I do, and knows how they can be impactful. So I think that's fantastic. So Nate, thank you so much. You were fantastic. Thank you to everyone for joining us today for this great presentation. Everyone in the audience with your questions, you guys were a great group, so we really appreciate you coming. If you're looking for other job search or career resources, visit our 4 talent career insights page on our website to find everything you're looking for. And be sure to follow us on your favorite social media platform, or all of them, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. Please, I'll see you on there firsthand. And be sure to learn about open jobs, connect with our network of clients and whatnot. For all of us at AR, we wish you success and happiness in your careers. Good luck, and we'll see you guys again soon. Have a nice day.